We're self-congratulatory. Does it work? Yes, it works. Okay, good. So we are. So we start with the first question, which will be put by a representative of the EPP group, starting with Jan Olbrycht.
Pani Przewodnicząca Parlamentu.
President of the Commission, I would like to point out to the fact that we're facing an unprecedented situation in the history of the European Union. Never so far has any European institution faced such serious problems. During our mandate, both the Parliament and the European Commission are facing such difficult challenges. They are so difficult that, in fact, we don't really know how to handle them. This resembles a stress test. It's a way of stressing our resilience. Is the European Union so resilient? But these are not drills. This is real life. That is why I wanted to ask you several questions. Taking into account the experience with the vaccines and the COVID pandemic, I would like to ask you what kind of lessons the European Commission has drawn. What was successful, what was not successful in terms of combating the pandemic and in terms of vaccinations. So if we look at today's situation, and let me just remind you, dear President, that we as a group, we submitted documents, papers to the European Commission listing what we think should be our priorities. So I would like to ask you how the Commission intends to act. What are the short-term and the long-term plans of the Commission? Does the Commission intend to do the so-called stress tests, so a review of legislation, both current legislation and the ongoing works on new legislation, taking into account the new circumstances? Are you planning such stress tests, and when? Do you intend to approach budgetary issues in a more radical way? I mean, a revision of the MFF and how to use the NGU. Are you planning to coordinate better the reception of refugees within the EU? Those are my questions. Please reply to them. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Many questions for the beginning. Indeed, the first question you asked was on the lessons learned with the vaccines. And if there's one lesson we have learned with the vaccines is for huge global challenges, the one and only way to address them is as 27 with unity. Just imagine for a second that all 27 member states would have gone on their own what the vaccines are concerned. Then 3 or 4 member states perhaps would have had vaccines. The rest would not have had any access to vaccines. It would have completely destroyed our European Union. So the first lesson is indeed the big challenges. We are much better together if we act united. Of course, we developed strategies or also structures that are necessary after this pandemic. For example, HERA, for example, the Health Union. So we understand that we have improved and adapt and modernize our structures. What the budgetary issues are concerned, indeed, we have a tight budget, without any doubt. I have not forgotten the negotiations around the budget, and it's tight, and it's programmed now, and it's very much allocated to the different topics. And now we see how it is when you have almost no wiggle room, because there's no extra money. We cannot print money, there's no free money, so it's very much bound. And indeed, with a midterm review, we have to check, we have to look what have we done, what is ahead of us, are we still on track with what we have allocated? But there's a third element in your question referring to Next Generation EU. Why did we form or develop Next Generation EU? Because we understood the crisis is so huge, the crisis is so dominant, that with the usual means and instruments and fund allocation, we are not able to manage it. So we did the one and only correct thing, that we said, let's do it as 27 Europeans together. And what we did better compared to the financial crisis, for example, there the solution was intergovernmental. So it was just the prescription for fragmentation that you could see. This time we had trust on the European level, 27 member states backing the European Commission to raise capital on the market, and the rest of the elements you very much know. So this shows that, yes, we have our budget, we have our usual procedures, but for extraordinary situations, we sometimes need extraordinary means and step forward. Finally, I cannot see my time because there are so many. So no, I'm already way over my time, sorry. But I need a little hole to see the seconds there. And honorable members, if it's fine with you, I remain standing because I have a medical issue on my back, so it's better for me I remain standing and look at you. Lectern would be fine too, but no, I think we agreed on this year this way.
Thank you very much. No supplementary question from Mr. Albrecht, I see, or one quickly, 30 seconds.
By the way, Madam President, we are not speaking about midterm review, but midterm revision. But my question was, what about the stress test? I mean, the revision of legislative which is existing in future. Thank you.
Why not, if it's appropriate? Because you know, things you have done in the past might have been good for the past, but the question, and this is the stress test element, is it fit for purpose? Is it fit for the future? Why not, is my answer.
Thank you very much. The next speaker on behalf of the S&D Group is Irache Garcia Perez.
Thank you.
Von der Leyen.
President von der Leyen, the pandemic and the Russian invasion of Ukraine have shown the European that it has to up its game. It's changed the face of the European Union. It's shown us, however, that we can actually constitute a strong protection, an effective protection for our citizens. And it has also given us an opportunity to adopt some measures which show that we have real commitment to support our citizens. We're working for the social pillar. We're supporting a number of initiatives and targets that have been proposed. We'd now like to know from the Commission how far they have actually progressed with their proposed legislation. The pandemic and the war can't be invoked as a reason not to make progress in social policy. In 2019, your social agenda was quite progressive, and it is extremely pressing for us to see some results from this. We haven't as yet seen enough in terms of unemployment reinsurance or the reduction in poverty levels, because there are far too many people living in abject poverty still. Thank you.
The floor.
Thank you so much. Indeed, the core value and the hallmark of the European Union is its social market economy. Nowhere in the world do you have this exclusive and phenomenal model as we have it here, which is very clear, and it's the success model after World War II, to say we all work hard together, but the benefits of our work is being evenly distributed. So there are checks and balances, and you know the elements from employer associations to trade unions to figure out how where the right balance is. And the second topic, which is for me of utmost importance, and that is the social security system. The social security system that says everybody pays in, and we make sure that the big risks in life, you're not let down, you're not alone, but we support you. It's poverty, it's made old age, it might be health or sickness. So these topics, unemployment, are covered. And I am deeply convinced that this is one of the secrets why the European Union is so successful and why the single market is so successful. And therefore, it's always important to contribute to it. You have been asking about the unemployment reinsurance, the sure element, which was crucial during the pandemic, is a typical unemployment reinsurance. because it had all the elements that were necessary to say to the companies, or to signal to the companies, don't dismiss your employees in the times of crisis, and we support you keeping them in the company even if there's not enough work to do. Because we know at the end of this crisis, skilled labor will be crucial to jump back again and to move forward to growth again. And it was the right thing to do. It was round about 100 billion. I think 94, 95 billion have been allocated to 19 member states. And that was one of the reasons why in the I was about to say in the aftermath of the pandemic, but we're not there yet. When things got better after the worst part of the pandemic, our economy bounced back so rapidly because we had the skilled personnel and could immediately take on the orders that came worldwide. Of course, there are other topics that we have to or had worked on, for example, the child guarantee, just to name one, but also in the agenda where we had to fight child poverty, social exclusion. You know that member states should at least use 5% of their ESF plus resources. I thank a lot that this is now a law that is put in place here. Without your help, it would not have been possible. And there are other topics we'll certainly, I see my time is again short, we'll certainly talk again about.
Thank you very much, Irache. 30 seconds.
Por supuesto, el modelo social.
Yes, of course. Thank you. The European social model is a success, but we need to build on it because we've got to be able to balance economic growth and social justice. If we can do this, then that is a major achievement. It will enable us to benefit from economic growth and turn this into a tool for enabling everybody to live better. But in order to achieve that, we need more proposed legislation from the Commission, for example, on a minimum wage and how this will be implemented in the member states. Thank you.
So the minimum wage directive is on its way, as you know. And I think it has a fair chance, and I hope it will be concluded. It is important for the minimum wage, for example, to really have a look at what we are asking for. I'm a deep believer of collective bargaining. This is, in my eyes, the right way to go forward for a minimum wage. And this is what is in the proposal. So it's very clearly signaling to those member states, and we have many of them, that have already a good collective bargaining system in place, to tell them, you're fine. That's a good system. Keep on going with that, and it works. We've seen that. But to those where this is not in place and where there is not really any kind of protection to the lower level of the income, there we signal very clearly, put in place, if possible, a collective bargaining system. If possible, the best is with employer unions and trade unions. If not, there are suggestions how to come to a minimum wage that strikes the right balance, not to be too low, not to be too high, in the circumstances a member state needs. So we've proposed, I think, a good model. It is also something which creates fairness among the member states and the market of 27. And if there's anything we've learned, then it is our single market functions best if it's well balanced, if there's fairness in it, if it is harmonious also in its rules, but this is another topic. So to finish and to conclude, the minimum wage directive would be absolutely a goal to go for.
Thank you very much. I now give the floor to Stéphane Séjourné.
Pardon. Merci beaucoup, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you very much, President. And thank you to yourself, President, and also Madam President of the Commission. Thank you for allowing us to hold this debate and this procedure, which my group was very much in favour of. It's very essential. Now, to talk about the long term and the fact that we don't have the necessary instruments for our autonomy in our continent. And we saw this back in 2019 in this Parliament with the Commission, where my political group supported the Commission in its proposals, which we found were good. The Ukraine war has now validated the need to work together on transition, on strategic autonomies and institutional reform, above all. So I have a simple question, Madam President. Are you in the Commission going to take another look at these priorities as laid down in 2019? And another simple question, is the Commission going to present a global plan to strengthen our strategic autonomy? And are you going to put forward or revise some of your priorities in view of the COVID crisis and the war in Ukraine?
Indeed, we had a cascade of crises. And looking back now to these 2.5 years, I remember we had 95 days in the mandate when the pandemic hit. Well, and you all know we are 2.5 years in the mandate, and now we have a war at our doorstep. We have fixed 3 priorities at the very beginning. The European Green Deal, and this is the huge, big, enormous crisis looming in the back and ongoing, getting more and more serious, more and more severe. If you read the World Climate Council comments yesterday and today, you're aware of that. And then we had the other crisis I was just talking about. So the European Green Deal, absolutely necessary, first priority, and we'll certainly speak in depth in this question time about it. Digital, self-explaining. Resilient, well, had I known before what is hidden behind the word resilient, resilience, now we know it. What have we done? We have not only had the pandemic common strategy, and actually we are world leaders what the effects are concerned. We have exported 2 billion doses of vaccines. In comparison, just to give you that, China 1.2 billion. We have the population, the best vaccinated population for a region like we are with 450 million Europeans, 72% now boosted and 72% fully vaccinated and 52% boosted. We have been working on the resilience in the health union. Now, indeed, to come to the part in your question, looking back and looking forward, is it still the right priorities? My answer is absolutely yes. But within the resilience part, I would emphasize stronger European defense and a conducive environment for our single market, focusing on the modern elements that we need. For example, hydrogen, for example, semiconductors. We will certainly also speak in depth about that in the question time. But the general approach, European Green Deal, digital and resilience is the right one, with new emphasis in the resilience part on defense and on the conducive economic environment.
Thank you very much. Do you have a supplementary question, Mr. Sejourné?
So, oui, juste pour...
Yes, thank you. We've seen the main pillar is the rule of law. That was one of the priorities, the basic fundamental priorities of this legislature. It has been questioned and threatened, and we still firmly believe that we will only be strong in the EU if we are strong in terms of our values within the EU. And basically, I'm asking you, what do you intend to do about Poland and Hungary?
But I'll start. First of all, it was a big step forward to have the rule of law report with the individual reporting on each member state. And indeed, if we now focus on many different issues, but the issues you have mentioning in Poland and in Hungary, there are 2 main topics. In Poland, it is the question of the independence of the judiciary. This is a big open question where we have an issue without any question. And as you know, there is the Article 7 procedure. As we know, we launched infringements. And as we know, and I guess we will discuss it, we have the open question of the Resilience and Recovery Fund. Next Generation EU, which is not a typical instrument to deal with topics like that, but it's an instrument for reform. And we put in the request that a major long-standing reform necessity in Poland is in the European semester, independence of judiciary. So happy to follow up on that. With Hungary, we've been very clear the issue is corruption. And we have been very clear on the Article 7 procedure. There are infringements also on other topics. We have been discussing with Hungary questions that are concerning the Resilience and Recovery Fund. Here, the main requirement for reform is the anti-corruption question. And we are, at the moment, being not able to find a common ground and to conclude. And then, with 13 seconds left, there's the big topic of the question of the conditionality mechanism, and I'm happy to respond with fresh time on that.
Thank you very much, President. Next is Arnaud Danjean.
Madame la Présidente.
Madam President, 1 week just after the invasion of Ukraine, the Commission presented its communication on defence, which was rather ambitious. Even if you have limited prerogatives, you indicated some specific elements like exemption from VAT for common projects and pooled purchases. In the two Council conclusions of Versailles and Brussels, it seems that the Council hasn't really gone for your proposals. It's something about implementation, but there's no real step up in terms of a calendar, which was, they talk about 2023, 2024. It's urgent. Something has to be done quickly. Are you in favour of a more rapid calendar? What do you think of this hesitancy?
This topic is an urgent topic. And we have certainly, in a bitter way, learned our lessons. We are learning our lessons. Just to get it right, and this is very important always at the very beginning, NATO is the strongest military alliance in the world, and the European Union will never, ever be a military alliance. But I see fields where NATO is necessary, but I also see other theaters or other topics where the European Union has to be able to act and to defend itself. Interestingly, as you know, there's the Article 5 in NATO and correspondent the Article 42.7. Now, what is the reality on the ground? The reality on the ground is we have 22 member states that are member of NATO, and we have 27 member states, of course, being members of the European Union. They all have one single set of forces. This is from the member states' view. The departure point. They have one single set of forces, and for them it's important that they can, if necessary, allocate these forces to a European mission, to a NATO mission, to a United Nations mission, or to a coalition of the willing. From the European perspective, for us it's important to look at, if we look at our 27 member states, what can we do to stop the fragmentation we do have between those 27? Where are the gaps that have to be filled with military capabilities? And what are capabilities we do not have at all and we need to build up? And therefore, if I take the last one, big topic for us, cybersecurity. Cybersecurity in the European Union is a must, and we have to get much better and build up real, reliable structures. The second topic is, if you look at the military capabilities, interoperability. Can these different troops work together immediately? Well, depends if they have the same military equipment. For that, we have created a system through PESCO and the European Defence Fund that is nudging the member states to have a common research and development and to have a common procurement or development of capabilities. Now, what speed is concerned, mid-May, the Commission will present a gap analysis. And this is the basis then for us to, starting from that, have the discussion: what is necessary, what do we have to build up, how are we going to build it up, and how are we going to finance it?
Thank you very much. Mr. Danjean, do you want a supplementary question? No. Thank you. Next is Gabi Bischoff.
Sehr geehrte Frau Präsidentin, ich freue mich.
Thank you, President. Thank you, President von der Leyen, for being here today. I'd like to point out that we, as the S&D, demanded an agenda for change and a conference on the future, which would lead to greater democracy. This was one of our conditions for supporting your nomination. In 4 weeks' time, we will have a report and some proposal emerging from the Conference on the Future of Europe. This has seen participation of very large numbers of citizens. We were very happy that you signed up to this in your political guidelines. You have attributed great significance and importance to it, and you have spoken out for a strengthening of parliamentary input and for democracy. You've also said you are open to treaty change, and I quote. So I'd like to ask you whether you would support a convention post the conclusions of the Conference on the Future of Europe. Thank you.
Meine grundsätzliche Haltung ist immer noch dieselbe.
Thank you. My fundamental position remains the same. And of course, here we are discussing many of the major issues which affect us all very closely today. This is one of the major policy questions for the future of the European Union. I absolutely welcome that so many citizens have participated, that have been involved. I'd like to pay tribute to all those who have done such excellent work over recent weeks and months. I can't thank you enough for all the effort and time you have invested. Indeed, in some 4 weeks, we will have some reports from this conference. We will have to make some decisions. What are we going to do about health, about defence? These are but two of the issues which have been raised here already this afternoon. What are we going to do about the energy union? I'm sure we will be discussing this afternoon too. What is our position on enlargement? What are we going to do about the very pressing requests there are for accession to the community? What are we going to do about majority voting? Now, this is far from a comprehensive outline of the questions, the pressing and vital questions we have to address. But alone, that suffices to show that we really do need to consider carefully how to progress from here on in. Do we need to change the treaties? We have seen many crises in the past which have shown us the limits of the treaties, the limitations of the treaties that we have. Now, it may be that we have enough flexibility to modernise, to improve within the confines of the current treaties. There again, it may not be. These are open questions, questions which are on the table. My position hasn't changed. I'm open to that. Thank you.
30 seconds.
Vielen Dank. Darf ich da noch mal nachhaken?
Thank you once again. Could I just ask a supplementary, saying that if the citizens actually do very much identify changes to the treaty which would strengthen parliamentary input and strengthen democracy, what, in your view, would be the 3 core points that we should address, and would you support that? Thank you very much. Well, that is a highly political question. It's also a somewhat hypothetical question where we don't yet know the outcome of the conference and what the proposals will be. Let me say that, of course, changes to treaties are not things that we can outline in a minute. And I think this would actually be lacking in respect not only of those who have participated in the conference and all the citizens, but it wouldn't actually do justice to the seriousness of the issue. Having said that, I'm open to discussion. It requires courage. I have that. It requires the will to change and to reflect. I think we've shown together that we absolutely have that. We've shown our mettle. We can deal with the major challenges we have, and we can react promptly to them. Thank you.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam President. Now, this pandemic, which was unexpected, you were able to keep up the momentum of the Green Deal. Now, the Ukraine-Russian war is something that we are very worried about. You talked about credible independence in terms of energy, with renewables being given priority. But gas, of course, is the central part of our concerns. And the Green Deal original sin was to allow the production-based, fossil fuel-based agriculture to continue. And so we have two important issues that have now been removed from the agenda. Now, only intensive agriculture based on intense agriculture is going to save us, but that has been said. But in fact, it's not possible to continue without reducing carbon, and we're very worried about destroying biodiversity. So my question is the Green Deal going to be the first victim of Vladimir Putin's actions, just when we need to speed up our action here?
First of all, and I think it's just the opposite. I think these last horrible 4 to 6 weeks have more than before shown us how important the European Green Deal is. We have seen the ugly dependency on fossil fuels. So moving away from fossil fuels into renewables, and thus moving forward in the European Green Deal, is not only a necessity because of the climate change we have to fight, but it's also a strategic investment in security. And therefore, if there's anything, there are certainly 3 things where Putin did never calculate on. The first one is the unity that we've shown in the European Union. The second one is the braveness of the Ukrainian population and soldiers. That's amazing to see that. The third one is that he is giving a strong push to get rid of the dependency of fossil fuels and to move forward to the strategic investment in renewables. If we just take Fit for 55, that has been designed before the war. Fit for 55, if we would go on as it is, and we will not because we will accelerate, so we need more of it. If we would only do that, it would already be 1/3 of our dependency of Russian fossil fuels. The second step that we've done is diversify away from the Russians into, yes, you're right, liquefied gas, that's true. But we do that because we also know we need it right now, but it's also the infrastructure that is fit for purpose for the green hydrogen. Therefore, the agreement I made together with the American President, Joe Biden, is not only about LNG, but also about our common goal to, as soon as possible, replace the gas by green hydrogen in the infrastructure that we are investing together. So 2 examples that show that if there's anything that happens, this war also pushes us, rightly so, away from the dependency from fossil fuels into the right way to go forward to investment in the renewables, and therefore the European Green Deal is as needed as never before.
Thank you very much. Philip, you want to come back?
Oui, je vous ai bien entendu. Maintenant, sur l'agriculture.
Yes. What is true for energy is also true for farming. We need to ensure that we are not dependent here on fossil fuels as well. But going on from what Stefan was saying, the second victim, the collateral victim of Putin, will that be the rule of law within the European Union? We've got quite clearly problems, as you've mentioned. I'd like you to talk about what you intend to do in the coming weeks. Because in Hungary, we've seen the result of total control of the media by the powers, the powers that be in the country.
Otherwise, perhaps I can have a little bit more. Indeed, and I hinted already at that, that looking at Hungary, we now have to look at the topic of conditionality mechanism. It is in force since January 21. Not a single case is lost. I want to be very clear here. Otherwise, we would not be today able to do what we want to do. We have prepared the guidelines. Many thanks for the support here in doing that. And you have seen the ECJ ruling that was reassuring that the court fully confirmed the approach followed by the Commission. But they also underlined that it's always needed to inform the member states and give them, and this is of course also rule of law, give them the opportunity to explain and to answer questions. That's what we've done. We've sent a letter to Hungary with questions. They have answered, and we've carefully assessed the result of these questions, and our conclusion is we have to move on the next step. And therefore, the Commissioner Hahn has today spoken to the Hungarian authorities and informed them that we will now send the letter of formal notification to start the conditionality mechanism. As you know, this triggers a procedure that has specific timelines, so a process is going on now.
Thank you very much. Esther de Lange is next.
Yes, thank you, Madam President. Madam Commission President, you already touched upon the fact that the war in Ukraine has demonstrated how dependent Russia is on fossil fuel imports from Russia. It was to the question of Philip Lambert's. At the same time, we're in a situation that inflation is reaching levels not seen for decades. I think it's 11-point-something% in my own member states. And our families and SMEs are already feeling the consequences of these incredibly high energy prices. How will the Commission ensure in this economic environment that we couldn't have foreseen when Fit for 55 was put on the table, that we will deliver on Fit for 55 with the objectives that we have for 2030, 2050? Will that be business as usual as foreseen at the time of publication, or are adaptations maybe needed? Thank you.
Rightly so, you were mentioning the high energy prices as really pressing families and businesses. What is the high energy price and high electricity price all about? As you know, rightly so, I think 20 years ago, when we designed the common energy and electricity market, it was decided that, first of all, the renewables, at that time a small share, were pushed into the electricity market, and then the different other kinds of energy are following. And at the very end comes in the most expensive energy source. But this most expensive energy source that comes into the market then is defining the price. This was well designed for a time where there were little renewables and lots of gas. Today it's different. If you look at the figures, they are very different in different member states, but overall, there's an enormous push forward for the renewables, and they are cost efficient. I mean, once in place, the costs are tiny. Then you have topics like the nuclear that is coming in, then you have other energy sources, and in the very end, gas, not a big share anymore, is coming in and dominating the price. So if there's anything we have to do to relieve the families and the business sector, is we have to work on the gas price. And there are two options. We have given recommendation for short-term measures, a toolbox member states are using. But in the mid and long term, the one topic is get rid of fossil fuels. This is also get rid of gas. We've discussed that. The other topic is look at the composition of the energy market. Is it really still appropriate that it is dominated by the gas price with all the consequences, or is it time to think of a new future model that is fit for purpose also with the new reality that we are all investing in and moving towards more, as much renewables as possible. And having said that, we'll deliver on that actually mid-May with a detailed plan, so-called Repower EU on that. Having said that, this is implicitly, of course, also advocating that Fit for 55, with the goal to honor the European Green Deal and the climate law that we have concluded all together, is absolutely the right way to go. Of course, now it's in the hands of the Parliament and of the Council also to find the right balance. But the general direction must be get rid of gas, get rid of fossil fuels, and go into all the topics that you are dealing with in Fit for 55.
Esther, you want to come back?
Very quickly, thank you for that reply. And of course, that will bear fruit in the medium to long term. But at the same time, I have vulnerable households in the Netherlands, but also in Germany, also in Romania, in all our member states, where families are putting the heating, even though it's freezing outside, on 16 because they can't afford anymore. And you promised change that would leave nobody behind. And had you asked me at the time, I would have said that Fit for 55 is challenging, you know, in terms of legislation and in terms of technical issues and socially. I would at this moment say the biggest challenge is the social challenge. And how can we together deliver on that promise of leaving nobody behind? We have the Social Climate Fund. Is it enough?
So in the very, very short term, we've presented measures to the member states really to leave nobody behind. That is, for example, that you work on the retail price, that you tax the windfall profits that are without any question there. Member states do that, and we leave thus vulnerable households or small businesses. It's happening in the member states themselves. But you're right, in the midterm, this transition from fossil fuels into renewables has to be accompanied by a social climate fund. We have made proposals how to get there, how to fund it, and the principle is very simple. There are incomes that, of course, can afford to move easily into the new, clean way to use energy. But there are households, it's impossible for them to do that. And these households need the support of all of us, and this is embedded in the Social Climate Fund.
Thank you very much. Mohammed Shahim is next.
Thank you, Chair. Dear President von der Leyen, 2.5 years ago, you shared with us your vision on the European Green Deal and called us our Man on the Moon project. You've had the full support of S&D on this. However, we can only call the Green Deal a success when we finish it as a whole. And that is what my group has signed in for. Lately, we have seen some adjustments in the timeline. Some legislative files have been postponed, some even twice. Yes, we understand that when we are dealing with unprecedented situation and skyrocketing energy prices. And some see this as the perfect excuse to delay. But the climate crisis cannot be paused. The biodiversity crisis cannot be paused. So my question to you, Madam President, can you agree that our Man on the Moon project will only succeed when we have a complete European Green Deal? Do you agree that we are in a biodiversity crisis and desperately need the nature restoration law and the revision of the Sustainable Use of Pesticides Directive? And can you explain to us why this is postponed twice?
Thank you, President.
Both will be tabled before the summer. So here, and I can basically underline every word that you've said. I mean, the drama of the climate crisis is the so-called horizon. We all know that. Because it seems to be so far away, it is not far away at all. But because it seems so far away, it is so difficult to keep the attention and the urgency high. What that topic is concerned. It's our responsibility to do that. It's our responsibility to tell people also the difference they can look forward with the European Green Deal, with a successful fight against climate change, but also what might happen if we're not successful. And we all remember the last summer, for example. I don't have to go into details anymore, where we got an idea what it means, and it will happen again and again. The droughts, the floodings, the hurricanes, with all the catastrophes that are coming along, this will haunt us if we don't move on fast and efficient. So you have my full support. As I said, both topics that you're mentioning will be tabled before the summer. And we all have to work very hard that besides the incredible impact that this war has on us, and that is besides the fact that it is taken, rightly so, all our attention and all our energy, we don't lose focus on the huge crisis that is looming in the background, and that is the climate crisis.
Thank you. Mohammed, you want to come back?
A very short follow-up, because I think the latest moment for us to really still tackle these two very important issues within this legislative period is, let's say, June 2022. So let me just ask a very simple, strict yes or no question. Can we expect these two legislations, let's say, by 22 June 2022? Yes or no?
what is the last week of Parliament in summer here we have? Is it that week?
I mean, it's postponed to June 22. And I mean, summer, so, yeah. I mean, summer is, let's say...
No, before we go into summer break, it will be tabled. I cannot oversee the date in June, but before we go into summer break, it will be tabled. Perhaps
there's a play on dates then. Thank you. Gunnar Beck.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, Mrs. von der Leyen. Thank you for coming.
Commission, a geopolitical commission, which would promote the European way of life and seek to assume a stronger role for Europe in the world. Now, you said these were long-standing concerns of yours, which would inspire your presidency. Now, in 2014, the European Council adopted Regulation 833, which prohibits the sale of dual goods to Russia. Now, these are goods, we all know, or technology, which may be put to military use. Now, according to various press reports in the Brussels Times, and oddly enough also the Deutsche Welle, between 2015 and 18, German companies exported electronic components which appear to have found their way into Russian drones. And there's also talk of German sales of depleted uranium. Now, during the relevant years, you were Germany's defense minister. So my question to you is really quite simple. Can you explain to us why these transactions were approved by the German Economics Ministry, which I believe is the agency that approves all arms exports, if they are allowed? And presumably this happened with the assent of your ministry, the Ministry of Defense. Thank you.
Are allowed, you said, if they are allowed, it's abiding to the law. I cannot oversee the assumptions you have given in your question, but if they are allowed, abiding to the law, the German government has taken the decision and the agency has then fulfilled.
Is there a supplementary question? I presume you don't have one.
Council Regulation 883 is quite clear. It says, I think in Article 2, it shall be prohibited to sell, supply, transfer, or export directly or indirectly dual-use goods and technology and any items which may be intended in their entirety or in part for military use or for a military end user. Thank you.
The President needs a microphone.
The sentence afterwards.
The sentence before says, where there is no sentence, it's recital number 7. In order to ensure that the measures provided for in this regulation are effective, it should enter into force immediately. And the sentence afterwards, sorry. Well, where the end user is the Russian military, any dual-use goods and technology procured by it shall be deemed for military use. I'm not sure that advances your case.
So this proves that everything was done abiding to the law, and this concludes my answer.
Thank you very much. Next is Alexander Vondra. Yeah, we see you. Turn on his microphone, please. 604.
Yeah, did not work before. Madam President, let me raise a question on behalf of the ECR. I think that this Putin aggressive war against Ukraine has changed everything. And the countries which are hit most by that are the countries of Central and Eastern Europe. They are hit by security dimension, they must arm, so NATO is very helpful here. They are hit by humanitarian crisis, you know, 3.5 million refugees were accommodated in the families, not in the camps of our countries. And in the matter of 4 weeks, not in the matter of 1 million in a year like 2015. We are hit by energy crisis. We are will be hit by food crisis. So, and for the time being, we just hear that, we are going to punish for the Poland, Hungary, which did not bring any result. We can see this in the election just over the weekend. So do you have something positive also for the Central and Eastern European countries in the time of when they are really in need of some solidarity?
Thank you, President.
Yes. The Central and Eastern European countries, and mostly their population, is outstanding, impressive, and they are a shining example how to receive the refugees from Ukraine. And therefore, they have our full support. We have flexibilized and mobilized 17 billion euros that can now be used, for example, for healthcare, schooling, housing, support of Ukrainian refugees. We know that sometimes the procedures are too long, therefore we have accelerated within these 17 billion euros, 3.4 billion euros that can be dispersed immediately, and afterwards you can prove the billing and all the accounting that has to be done. So we are very impressed by the Central and Eastern European population, the way the population is dealing with our Ukrainian friends, and they have this full support, and this is a very clear message.
Thank you.
In that respect, I think it might be also necessary to say that, as you mentioned, 2015, it shows that war refugees always find protection in the European Union. This is a core principle of the European Union. And I have also not forgotten that in 2015, there were member states that protected the war refugees from Syria at that time.
Thank you very much. Mr. Vondra, do you want to come back?
Yeah, now it's just 80% are the little kids and the remains are their mothers. That's a bit different. But question to gas, you were talking about the common purchases on behalf of the EU. So what we see now in Qatar is just a run by Germany, Italy, the member states to buy the last remaining gas. So is Commission going to Qatar?
This is not strictly speaking a follow-up question, but if the President wants to answer, you can answer.
So, we share the same approach to say it's better to have a joint procurement because we have an enormous market power. Let me give you one figure. If you look at the pipeline gas, we, the European Union, are purchasing 75% of the global pipeline gas. So if we act as 27, we are really powerful with a lot of purchasing power, and therefore I recommend to do that together. And what the Commission has done is already agreed with the United States that for this year we get an additional 15 billion cubic meter of LNG, which will replace the Russian LNG for this year. And from next year on, we will have an additional 50 billion cubic meter LNG, which will replace 1/3 already of the Russian gas. So you see, the Commission is active.
Thank you very much. Next is Martin Schüdewan.
Ja, vielen Dank, Frau Präsidentin, Frau Kommissionspräsidentin. Lassen Sie mich zunächst sagen, dass meine Fraktion diese Fragestunde sehr unterstützt hat. Aus zwei Gründen. Erstens gibt Ihnen das die Gelegenheit, politische Bilanz zu ziehen, und zweitens uns Abgeordneten die Gelegenheit, unsere demokratische Kontrollfunktion besser auszuüben gegenüber der Kommission. Ich habe eine konkrete Frage an Sie, und zwar bezieht die sich auf eine Aussage, die Sie zu Beginn Ihrer Amtszeit getätigt haben. Sie haben sich hier vor dem Haus für mehr Steuergerechtigkeit ausgesprochen. Und wenn ich mir die Bilanz an dieser Stelle ansehe, dann muss ich doch sagen, ist reichlich wenig seitdem passiert. Eine effektive Besteuerung von Digitalunternehmen ist der eher vagen Idee der globalen Mindestbesteuerung von multinationalen Unternehmen gewichen. Ein Regelwerk, das sich so löchrig wie ein Schweizer Käse präsentiert. Die Finanztransaktionssteuer, die wir diskutiert haben, ist nicht eingeführt worden, keine Spur davon. Die würde 40 Milliarden Euro jedes Jahr uns zur Verfügung stellen an zusätzlichen Eigenmitteln, unter anderem auch für den Green New Deal. Und was mich auch sehr irritiert, ist, dass die europäischen Steueroasen weiterhin in Ruhe gelassen werden und dass es überhaupt keine politischen Bemühungen gibt, diese Steueroasen zu schließen. Vor dem Hintergrund der aktuellen kriegerischen Auseinandersetzung des Krieges in der Ukraine und unseren Versuchen, gezielte Sanktionen auch zu implementieren gegenüber den Oligarchen, die diesen Krieg unterstützen, sieht man, wie schädlich diese Politik auch sein kann, wenn die Steueroasen nicht geschlossen werden, wie schwer es uns fällt, dann an das Geld heranzukommen derjenigen, die diesen Krieg unterstützen. Und meine Frage lautet, wann wird die Kommission endlich etwas gegen dieses kriminelle Geld unternehmen? Wann werden die europäischen Steueroasen endlich geschlossen?
Ich unterstreiche mit Ihnen oder bin mit Ihnen einer Meinung, dass wir alles tun müssen, um diese Steueroasen zu schließen und vor allen Dingen um kriminelle Aktivitäten zu unterbinden. Ich teile natürlich nicht Ihre Ansicht, was die allgemeine Entwicklung angeht, denn ich bin der Meinung, dass wir einen Riesenschritt nach vorne gemacht haben mit der Einigkeit in der OECD, mit der globalen Mindestbesteuerung. Wir haben das noch nicht abgeschlossen, aber es ist ein Riesenschritt vorwärts, wenn das gelingt. Nicht nur für die Europäische Union, sondern auch für alle die anderen, die mit in diesem OECD-Beschluss drin sind. Und deshalb war es uns auch recht, zu sagen, okay, wir halten unsere Digitalsteuer, die einen viel geringeren Effekt gehabt hätte, zurück, solange wir sicher sein können, dass dieses breitere, größere und bessere Konzept der Mindestbesteuerung und der Besteuerung der großen Unternehmen, da ist ja noch ein zweites Standbein mit dabei, solange dies gut vorangeht. Ich würde immer plädieren, und Sie haben es ja eigentlich eben selber auch zu Recht gesagt, Steuer und Steuerflucht heißt, man muss global agieren. Es reicht nicht, dass wir alleine als EU 27 vorankommen, sondern wir müssen global agieren. Also kann ich nur alle einladen, mit daran zu helfen, dass diese OECD-Initiative dann auch erfolgreich abgeschlossen wird.
Ja, sehr gern, weil ich wiederum diese Antwort nicht teile und an der Stelle auch für unbefriedigend achte, weil die globale Mindestbesteuerung von dem Steuersatz 15% ausgeht und kleine und mittelständische Unternehmen in der Europäischen Union einen durchschnittlichen Steuersatz von 23% zum Beispiel haben. Also multinationale Unternehmen werden hier besser gestellt als das Handwerk zum Beispiel oder als die Betriebe, die unsere Gesellschaften am Leben halten. Und wenn man einen Steuersatz ähnlich dem für kleine und mittelständische implementierte, dann wäre das Steueraufkommen viel höher. Es läge bei schätzungsweise 460 Milliarden, gibt es Schätzungen, und mit 15% liegt der Steuersatz bei nur ungefähr 120. Deshalb meine Frage, was halten Sie von zusätzlichen Eigeneinnahmen wie zum Beispiel Krisengewinnsteuer, also exzessive Gewinne besteuern? Was halten Sie davon, endlich eine aktive Quellensteuer durchzusetzen, also dort zu besteuern, wo wirtschaftliche Aktivität stattfindet? Und was halten Sie davon, endlich die Steuerschlupflöcher zu schließen und endlich auch den europäischen Steueroasen den Geldfluss sozusagen zu verwehren?
Steuerschlupflöcher zu schließen ist immer eine ehrenwerte Aufgabe. Mir wäre es schon sehr recht, wenn die großen Multinationalen überhaupt adäquat Steuern zahlen. Das ist ja der Punkt, der bei dieser OECD-Mindestbesteuerung erreicht werden soll. Es wäre ein Riesenschritt voran, auch übrigens in der Europäischen Union. Es ist ja nicht so, dass hier alles Gold ist, sondern es wäre ein Riesenschritt voran, wenn wir das auch in der Europäischen Union so schaffen würden. Und deshalb mein Plädoyer dafür zu arbeiten. Grundsätzlich ist die Besteuerung dann eine Aufgabe der Mitgliedstaaten, aber ich glaube, wenn man eine allgemeine Mindestbesteuerung hinkriegt, wie sie eben skizziert ist, für alle, auch die großen Multinationalen, fällt es den Mitgliedstaaten auch sehr viel einfacher, es ist eigentlich selbsterklärend, dann für die kleineren und mittleren Unternehmen deutliche Entlastung auch zuzulassen.
Thank you. Thank you. Next is Sophie Intveld.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam President, it is very good that you will be triggering the conditionality regulation on Hungary. It's a bit unfortunate that the door is closed when the horse has bolted. Will you make the same mistake with Poland? Despite the fact that the Polish government has no intention to even meet the conditions, we hear rumours that the Commission is ready to approve the RRF plan and to release the funds. Can you state here in a very clear, simple and unambiguous yes or no, will you or will you not travel to Warsaw on the 9th of April and approve the plans and free the way for the release of funds? Would you agree with me that such a decision would be a slap in the face of the Polish people standing up against autocracy? And would you agree with me that it would also mean reducing the rulings of the European Court of Justice to mere non-binding recommendations? Thank you.
Thank you, President. So you put several questions into your question where you wanted a yes or no answer. This is impossible, but I disagree with many of your hypothetical arguments, but I have to say, yes, I will travel on the 9th of April to Warsaw, but not to approve the RP, but to do a global pledging for refugees in Ukraine and outside Ukraine, not only concerning our member states, but also a global pledging with the G20-1, for example, also a global pledging concerning all the private companies, not only the European Union, but also globally, to really support the refugees, not only in the European Union, but also in Ukraine. So therefore, that's one part. Now, on the other part of your question, which is not a yes or no answer, I was very clear on the mid-July, I think it was here in the plenary, that we discussed what are the conditions for the Polish RRP. It's the long-standing requirement in the European semester, independence of the judiciary, and here we look at 3 reform requirements. The one is dismantling the disciplinary chamber. The second one is the reform of the disciplinary regime. And the third one is the process to reinstall the unlawfully dismissed judges. Where does it come from? It is part of a ECJ ruling. And with all the member states, we have always been very clear. There are reform requirements you have to fulfill. Then there's the disbursement of the investment. You do not have to do everything 100%. We don't ask any member state for the 100% pension reform or the 100% labor market reform, but long-standing major requirements of the European semester you have to do. These are the 3 requirements we want to see in the RRP fulfilled. How could it be fulfilled? The Polish government has to bring a law through the parliament that fulfills these 3 criteria. We're not there yet, just to make that clear. We are close, but we're not there yet. And when the criteria are fulfilled, then, or when the law has passed the parliament, then we look whether this law is fit for purpose to fulfill these 3 criteria I was just naming initially. If that is the case, so a milestone is reached, then a disbursement can start. This is the process. We're not there yet. Therefore, on the 9th of April, I'm going to be in Warsaw for the pledging.
Thank you. Sophie, do you want to come back quickly?
Yes, thank you. Of course, support to Poland for the reception of refugees that is not a debate. But what you're saying is the rule of law is non-negotiable, but we can negotiate on the way it is implemented. I have heard in recent weeks too much speculation about what that means in practice, Madam President. 3 years ago, you asked for our confidence. When there is so much speculation, there cannot be confidence. I would really ask you to be crystal clear about what it is, what the criteria are that the Commission will apply. I think this House and the citizens of Poland, the citizens of Hungary, indeed the citizens of all the 27 member states have a right to know exactly what the standards are. Thank you.
The standards are dismantling of the disciplinary chamber, reform of the disciplinary regime, process to reinstall the unlawfully dismissed judges. This is the core of the ECJ judgment. And actually, a judgment where Poland is paying a daily fine right now for not fulfilling this order of the ECJ. So we've taken that as a very clear benchmark. We want this reform done. The best way to have this reform done is have a law that has gone through the parliament, where we then can look whether it is fit for purpose, it fulfills the criteria. If not, the milestone is not fulfilled. If yes, the milestone is fulfilled and a disbursement for the European Green Deal, for the digitalization, for the resilience can start. We're not there yet, but I described as you wanted the process.
Thank you very much. Madam President, do you have time for one more question? Sven Simon, and then we close.
Frau Präsidentin, zunächst einmal ganz herzlichen Dank, dass Sie sich...
Thank you very much indeed. First of all, Madam President, for agreeing to do this question time. This is an achievement. I'd like to take up what Ms. Bischoff raised with you and ask you a bit more in detail, but I'd also like to comment on what is going on in this terrible time globally. I think we've realized that we need reliable partners, and at times we have not made adequate progress in terms of the trade deals that we ought to be concluding. We need them for economic reasons, to deliver prosperity, to create jobs, but we need them in order to set European standards globally. We need them in order to be able to establish closer links with like-minded democracies. We've got to forge these links for everybody's sake. I'd like, therefore, to ask you whether you think that this hiatus, which has been caused by Ukraine and the war there, will then eventually lead to ratification of the Mercosur, Australia and New Zealand trade agreements. Thank you. Well, we have made progress with Australia and New Zealand, considerable progress, in fact, especially in the case of New Zealand. Therefore, we will hope to deliver on those. We will be embarking on negotiations with India. We still have some way to go with Mexico. If I might say so, I think indeed we should probably be rethinking our fundamental premises for negotiation of such trade deals, because I think sometimes we have learnt over the longer term that we can reach a point of impasse. Our friends in the Canaries are speaking to us quite persistently and asking us why we are not actually concluding CETA. Many people have been taking us to task on this. Why have we not signed off on it? But look at the situation in which we find ourselves. Look at the supply chain issues that we have been struggling with. Look at the critical raw materials, the critical mineral resorting, rare earths, gas. Look at all these critical, vital resources which come to us from Russia, which we can't rely on anymore, which we therefore need to locate elsewhere. We could be discussing this with Canada. This is undoubtedly something which we need to consider. We need to consider how we can achieve more environmentally friendly sourcing of such minerals in an area such as Canada. So we absolutely should be working closely with them. So I'm sorry perhaps to have answered at some considerable length, but the answer essentially is yes, we're working hard on this. We're seeking to make progress. We're trying to define new formats and new frameworks for achieving results faster. And perhaps I should just say that the Trade and Technology Council, which we've established with the US, has actually proved its worth, because it's a format where we can look at smaller issues, very small packages of problems, for example, LNG, steel tariffs, digital issues. So we can discuss single isolated matters or closely related targeted issues. So yes, absolutely, we need to select our partners carefully. Reliability and trust certainly should be a basis, and yes, we should be flexible going forward with the packages that we negotiate. Thank you.
Sven, we don't have too much time. Thank you. We try to squeeze in as much as possible, but Commission President would like to thank you for giving us more time than we originally asked for. Thanks for apologies for the technical problems, but I think this, for a question time, first time, did very well after 12 years since this has last taken place in this plenary. A lot of you colleagues have asked to take the floor. Can I ask you to still register your questions for the next question time with the High Representative, if those questions can be put to him? Thank you very much. This part is closed.